All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are cracking open a cold case that's been baffling people for over 150 years. We're talking about one of the greatest, most enduring mysteries the sea has ever produced.
So here's the question that sits at the very heart of this thing. How does a crew of 10 people, an entire crew, just vanish from a perfectly good ship? And we're not just talking about sailors here. We're talking about the captain, his wife, and even their 2-year-old little girl. Gone, without a single trace.
Okay, so let's set the scene. Picture this. It's December 4th, 1872. You're on a Canadian ship, the De Gracia, out in the middle of the vast North Atlantic. And then you see it, another vessel, just kind of drifting weirdly, its sails all ripped up and flapping in the wind. Something is clearly wrong.
So a small boarding party, led by the first mate, a guy named Oliver DeVoe, they row over to investigate. And what they find is nothing. Well, no one. The ship, the Mary Celeste, is completely deserted. It's got a full cargo, plenty of food and water for months, but not a single soul on board. It's literally a ghost ship. So what on earth did the evidence tell them?
And this is where things get really weird. The clues just don't add up. On one hand, you've got the ship's only lifeboat missing, along with important navigational gear. That screams planned, orderly evacuation, right? But then, you have all their personal stuff left behind. Their pipes, their boots, even a little kid's toys completely untouched. And trust me, sailors back then did not leave their pipes behind. So now you have this complete contradiction. Was it an orderly departure or a moment of sheer blind panic?
And this, right here, just deepens the mystery. They found about 3.5 feet of water in the ship's hold. Now, to you and me, that might sound like a lot, but for a ship this size, it's nothing. Totally manageable. It's certainly not a "we're sinking, abandoned ship" kind of situation. So why would a seasoned captain like Benjamin Briggs, a man known for being incredibly capable, abandon his perfectly good ship?
So naturally, there had to be an official investigation. They towed the ship to Gibraltar, and you'd think this is where we'd start getting some answers. But nope, the whole thing went off the rails almost immediately, thanks to one guy, a prosecutor who was absolutely convinced he was looking at a crime scene. This investigator, Frederick Sully Flood, he had his mind made up. He imagined this whole story of mutiny, murder, probably a drunken rampage, and he grabbed onto anything he could to prove it. He pointed to some nicks and cuts on the ship's bow, and get this, what he insisted were blood stains on the captain's own sword. To him, this was clear proof of a violent, bloody fight. There was just one tiny problem with his theory. The facts didn't back it up, not even a little bit. Forensic tests proved those blood stains weren't blood at all. And the marks on the hull? Naval experts took one look and said, yeah, that's just what happens to wood after being tossed around in the ocean. So Sully Flood's whole dramatic story of a drunken mutiny just completely fell apart. And the court was left right back where it started, completely clueless.
So what's the big takeaway here? The official investigation was a total bust. It didn't find any answers, but it did manage to ruin some reputations. The poor crew of the De Gracia, the guys who found the ship, they got paid only a tiny fraction of what they should have for salvaging it. Why? Because even though there was no proof, the court's suspicions stuck to them like tar. It was completely unfair.
So with no official answers, you get this information vacuum. And you know what rushes in to fill a vacuum? Myths, legends. And in this case, one very famous writer stepped in and basically defined how the world would see the Mary Celeste forever.
Yeah, we're talking about Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, the guy who created Sherlock Holmes. Back in 1884, before he was super famous, he wrote this really dramatic short story. To make it juicier, he took some, let's say, creative liberties with the facts. He changed the ship's name to the Mary Celeste, he pretended the lifeboat was still there, and he basically invented this whole new story involving murder.
And this is where all those classic ghost ship details you've probably heard come from. You know, the idea that the tea was still warm on the table or that meals were laid out uneaten. It's all complete fiction, made up by Doyle for his story. But man, it was a good story. So good, in fact, that people started treating it as the truth. And just like that, the Mary Celeste stopped being a real-life forensic puzzle and became a spooky ghost story.
But okay, what if the answer has nothing to do with ghosts or sea monsters? What if we can use modern, 21st century science to finally figure out what really happened? Let's dive into that.
So, the first big clue lies in the ship's cargo. The Mary Celeste was carrying over 1,700 barrels of industrial alcohol. Now, the official inquiry noted that 9 of those barrels were empty. And here's the crucial detail. Those specific 9 barrels were made from a different kind of wood, red oak, which is way more porous. That means they were much more likely to leak, filling the cargo hold with highly flammable alcohol fumes.
Okay, so you've got this hold full of fumes. What happens next? Well, in 2006, some scientists at University College London actually decided to test this. They recreated the conditions and discovered that if those fumes ignited, you'd get something called a pressure wave explosion. Now, this is the cool part. It creates a massive, terrifying whoosh of sound and a big wave of flame, but it's not actually hot enough to burn or even scorch the wood. It would, however, be powerful enough to blow the main cargo hatch right off its hinges.
Now, put yourself in Captain Briggs's shoes for a second. You have no idea about the science of a pressure wave explosion. All you know is that there was a massive, loud blast from the cargo hold where you're carrying thousands of barrels of flammable alcohol. It would have looked and sounded like the entire ship was about to go up in a fireball. And remember, his wife and his 2-year-old daughter are on that ship with him. What do? You get them off the ship, now.
But believe it or not, that terrifying explosion probably wasn't the only thing that went wrong. The real answer here, the full picture, comes when you realize it wasn't just one single thing. It was a perfect storm, a cascade of small, seemingly unrelated problems that all came together to create one giant, fatal disaster. Okay, just think about the absolute nightmare Captain Briggs was dealing with. Factor 1, a huge explosion makes him think his ship is on fire and about to sink. Factor 2, his water pumps are clogged with coal dust, so when he checks them, they probably give him a false reading, making him think the ship is taking on way more water than it really is. And the final nail in the coffin, Factor 3, his chronometer, his main tool for navigation, was broken. He was nearly 120 miles off course. So he thinks his ship is burning, he thinks it's sinking, and he has no idea where he is. The psychological pressure must have been immense. So here's what most likely happened in those final moments. After the blast, Briggs makes a call, get everyone into the lifeboat, but don't cut loose. They probably tied the lifeboat to the Mary Celeste with a long, strong rope, the idea being to just get some distance and wait to see if the ship explodes, a temporary safety measure. But then, disaster. All it would take is one unexpected squall, a sudden gust of wind catching those big sails, causing the ship to surge forward, and snap. The rope breaks, and suddenly they're adrift in a tiny boat, watching their perfectly fine ship sail away without them in the middle of the rough Atlantic. There would have been no way back.
And that, right there, is the ultimate, heartbreaking irony of this whole story. The ship that Captain Briggs and his family fled for their very lives, it was never in any danger at all. It was fine. In fact, the Mary Celeste sailed for another 13 years, passing through 17 different owners before it was finally, deliberately wrecked for insurance money. The ship was always okay.
So in the end, the story of the Mary Celeste isn't really about ghosts, is it? It's not about sea monsters or paranormal activity. It's a truly haunting lesson about something far more real. How bad information, combined with fear and the incredible pressure of making life or death decisions, can create a total catastrophe, even when there was no real danger to begin with.